Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird of the Blackbird Grimoire. Welcome back to our class Wicca 303. This week, the lesson is focused upon advice, both the giving and the receiving of it. So let's begin our discussion with examining the nature of advice. Advice can be a medicine, it can be a placebo, or it can be an active poison. And the kind of advice, in order to be beneficial, it has to suit the needs of the circumstances and the people who are actually involved in the situation. If it is not relevant, then it isn't good advice, no matter how well intentioned. And advice must be given in the right amount to do any good. And you also have to be aware of the pitfall that dispensing advice as a habit can make a person rather vain, and ignoring advice, particularly when it is relevant, it can be extremely dangerous and detrimental. So, what is advice? According to the dictionary, it is guidance or recommendations offered with regard to prudent future action, a formal notice of a financial transaction, or it can be information or news. And as practitioners, we are primarily concerned with the first definition. Now, your role. Witchcraft is literally the craft of the wise, and the wise and those who seek wisdom, they will naturally be consulted by people who are desiring guidance and insight of some kind. So at some point, this is inevitable, someone will seek your advice because they know you are a practitioner. And there will also be occasions when you need advice. And if anything, I've learned in the past years of my practice and study, more often we are needing advice than we are needing to be dispensing it. So we've got it coming and going, and try all you might. There's just no escaping the issue of advice. Dispensing advice, of course, is a considerable responsibility, because if you advise someone to do something and it has a really bad outcome, then you have played a role. Yes, they made the ultimate decision to act on your advice, but they might not have come to that conclusion or have that idea in their head if it had not been for you. So your hands are not exactly clean in that situation. And deciding what advice to take in your turn, that can become quite the conundrum. So today's class, it's not going to be about making advice easy. The discussion is about us taking on the challenge with open eyes, since this is something we just can't avoid. So, receiving advice. To begin with, consider the source. I cannot emphasize that enough. Just because someone is flapping their lips or, typing along on their keyboard, or because they made a video, that doesn't mean that what they say is automatically valid. And this is the great danger in people who treat all opinions equally. There's a difference between acknowledging that people have the right to their opinions and then acknowledging that those opinions are worth anything. And it's the same principle with advice. You have to consider their course. Who are they? What is their worldview? What is their intention with giving you what they're telling you? How have their own life worked out? These are things we have to consider, especially the business about looking for examples of people who applied similar counsel to what we're receiving, looking how it turned out for them, especially if it was the same person giving them that advice. Really look at that very carefully. Examine your circumstances and your role in having created those circumstances very carefully, thoughtfully, honestly, when you're thinking about remedies to a situation. Focus on creating long-term good. And of course, be true to your life's purpose and be true to your purpose in the craft. This is another example about sometimes you might receive advice that would be very good for someone who perhaps had a different focus in the craft. If someone is primarily focused upon herbalism and someone else is doing divination, and another person is focused a lot more on ceremonial. Working with the land in a more ceremonial and seasonal way, depending upon what they're doing, they're going to be requiring different kinds of advice because their purpose is focused in a different aspect of the craft. So something to think about there. And then giving advice. It's probably best if we speak from a position of actual life experience that we have and that we keep the realities of life at the forefront of our minds. I mean, I don't think it's very helpful to give, in a perfect world, I think X, Y, or Z would be really nice and would work out really well. Please abandon ideas of perfect world. It doesn't exist, it never will. Deal with reality, deal with life as it is, deal with the world as it is. That is the only world that you are dealing with. Even if you are trying to sow the seeds for a better world, you have to begin with dealing with what is if you hope to make any kind of improvement or help anybody else. And remember, you are offering ideas, suggestions, not commandments. That's not your role, it's not your right. And the person you are advising, they are perfectly free to accept or reject what you have to say. You might be 100% correct. You might be having giving that person the advice that is just the ticket for to get them out of a difficult situation. They still have the right to decide whether they're going to accept it or reject it. Now, the consequences, of course, are on their head. And if you gave them good advice and they didn't take it, it's no reflection upon you. But you have to let go of controlling of that outcome, controlling their decision making. That's not your role. And of course, keep the needs and personality of the person you're advising in mind. So, when you are seeking advice, use your divination tools. I mean, this is what we have them for. It's not just about in the future, next 6 months, what's going to be coming my way. That's part of divination. But what I have found divination particularly useful for is getting advice, using it as a means to get in contact with the gods and with any other energies that might want to be speaking to me through the language of tarot or the runes or the agam or whatever else. Make use of your tools. This is part of what they're for. And of course, meditate. You might not be needing external advice. Maybe you just need to be sit down, breathe for a little while, and ask yourself, what would I tell someone who is in a similar situation? If it wasn't, if I wasn't so close to this, if I was just looking at this from a little bit more distance, a little bit more objectively, what would I think? What would I say to someone else? That can really clarify things. You can be asking for signs from your guides, your ancestors, your gods. Take counsel from older people and those who are more spiritually experienced than you. If they've seen more and done more, they might have some insight. Not all the time, but it's a place to start. And I wouldn't, begin with rejecting their advice without good reason. And of course, be open to advice that isn't what you expected or isn't what you wanted to hear. Advice is not about saying everything will just be lollipops and kittens for you. That might be what you want to hear, but it may not be what you need to hear. In fact, more often than not, it is the exact opposite of what you need to hear. So be open to taking it, even if it's involving things that you didn't feel like dealing with. Well, too bad. That's going to be the pathway to improving your situation. Cope. Um, and of course, get creative. A different perspective can really stimulate your imagination. That's one of the lessons we learned from the Hanged Man and the Tarot. Looking at things from a radically different viewpoint that can clarify things for it. And of course, obstacles can always be transformed into opportunities. And you do need to make the most of good counsel when it comes your way, and use that counsel to propel you forward on your path. That's the purpose of it. That's what it's for. And always remember that it is up to you to take proper action. It is your life, it is your spiritual practice. Own it accordingly. Now, for our homework for April 12th through April 18th. Number one, what has been your experience with giving and receiving advice? Examining the attitudes you're going into with this subject, that can clarify a lot of things for you. It can let you see, okay, maybe I'm a bit biased this direction. Maybe I got some bad advice and it really poisoned the well. Maybe I'm concerned about the impact I have on other people. So it's causing me to be quiet when maybe I actually do have some useful advice to give to them. Just look at it from all angles, and that'll put you in a better stead of knowing about where you need to go. What direction you need to take this. Number two, what advice would you give to someone just starting their craft? Now, you might think, I'm still very much in the student space. This is Wicca 303. No one told me I graduated. Well, of course, you never really graduate from the craft. You don't graduate spiritually from anything. But you have been, if you've been going through this class week by week, I mean, you're 2.5 years through the process, more than. So you should have accumulated some insight. So if someone was at the very beginning, what would you tell them? And why would you tell them that? And number three, what pitfalls of giving and receiving advice concern you the most? I don't encourage you to set aside your your anxieties about this. Rather, I would encourage you to address them. What problems have you seen? What do you think some of the remedies for those problems are? Are some of those problems avoidable, or is it just it's the nature of the beast? Don't be afraid to confront these things. You're always better off seeing things as they are, at least as close to how they are as what you possibly can from the limitations of your own perspective. That's what I have for you this week. Next week we will be discussing how we might befriend the Fae. So I hope you'll be back for that. In the meantime, comments, questions, concerns, complaints, let me know all about them in the comments section below, or email me at brigantiablackbird@protonmail.com. If it's not something you really want to discuss publicly, I'll be happy to answer you there. But that will do it for today, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.